My name is Emma Parker, and when I was 32 years old, I discovered something that shattered my world. If you've ever felt invisible inside your own family, if you've ever been pushed aside by the very people who should have stood by you, then you'll understand what I'm about to share. This is not just a story about money or inheritance. This is about betrayal, about truth, and about finally taking back my place at the table. Stay with me because what I uncovered changed everything. The floorboard creaked softly under my foot, but nobody inside noticed. I froze outside the study, my hand halfway raised to knock. That's when I heard my father's voice. Calm, dismissive, sharp. He spoke like he was listing groceries, not cutting someone out of his life. Your sister, he said. She doesn't deserve a dime. She's out. My breath caught. My chest tightened. I didn't blink. The sound of my own heartbeat filled my ears, so loud it felt like the walls could hear it. If you've ever stood in a hallway like that, listening to people you love quietly erase you from their lives, you know how heavy silence can feel. Inside the study, my older sister Claire didn't argue. She didn't hesitate. And then from the couch, I heard my stepmother Marjorie. She let out a low hum, a satisfied sound, like someone who had finally won. I leaned slightly, just enough to see through the narrow crack of the door. Marjorie sat upright, perfectly composed, teacup balanced in her hand. Her lips curled into that small, tight smile she always wore when her plans were working. She wasn't just content, she was proud. Cutting me out wasn't cruel to her. It was natural, expected. I closed my eyes, stepped back before they noticed me, and walked away. The staircase felt endless, each step heavier than the last. My feet moved, but my body felt numb. I didn't cry. I never cried for them. I walked into the guest room, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened my laptop. My fingers moved fast, faster than my thoughts. Passwords, security codes, verification texts. Within minutes, I moved everything I owned into a private account, place they would never find. They thought I'd freeze in that hallway, too shocked to act. They thought I'd keep playing my role, quiet, helpful, invisible. But they didn't know me. Not really. The truth was, I had already been suspicious. The skipped invitations, the fake smiles, the estate paperwork that never reached my inbox, all signs. And what they really didn't know was this. I knew about Grandma Ruth's second trust. The one they pretended didn't exist. The one that had matured just 2 weeks ago. I closed my laptop gently, walked to the dresser, and unlocked the top drawer. Beneath old scarves and a faded photograph was a folded slip of paper in my grandmother's handwriting. My name was written clearly. Mine and only mine. It hadn't started with the trust. No, it started with small things. My name missing from the family text about Thanksgiving. A photo on Marjorie's social media cropped right before my shoulder. A dinner where Claire raised her glass for a toast to family, and somehow her eyes slid right over me. I told myself it was grief. That losing Grandma made people act strangely. That maybe I had turned into a ghost in their house because my presence reminded them of her too much. I even apologized once out loud for being a lot lately. No one corrected me. Looking back now, I see it for what it really was: rehearsal. A slow, careful erasing of my place at the table, one omission at a time. Claire had always been the favorite. Not because she begged for it, but because she carried it like a custom dress sewn just for her. She knew how to flatter Marjorie with words about family legacy. She copied Dad's serious tone in business matters before she ever had a job. She was the one they bragged about at events, the one who got the seat with a view. And me? I was useful in silence. The one who helped Grandma balance her checkbook when her hands trembled. The one who wrote the thank you cards Marjorie couldn't be bothered with. The one who held the fragile pieces together so they could pretend everything was fine. I told myself being good was enough. But Claire was always 5 steps ahead. And Marjorie? She played the long game. That smile I saw in the study, it wasn't new. I'd seen it years before. At Christmas, when I showed up with gifts and found out dinner had been moved without telling me. At Grandma's funeral, when I gave the eulogy and nobody clapped. Marjorie just said, "That was brave," like she was checking off a box. I just hadn't known what I was seeing until now. I unfolded Grandma Ruth's note again. The ink was still crisp. There was an address, a name, and a small key taped to the back. I knew immediately what it unlocked. The drawer in her old sewing desk. I hadn't touched that desk in years. She used to joke that it held memories better left folded. But when I slid the drawer open, it didn't feel like memories. It felt like instructions. Inside, there were 3 things. The first was a legal envelope, thick and heavy. On the outside, amendment to last will and testament. The notary seal was clear. The witness signatures clean. The date? Just 1 month before Grandma passed. My name was printed on every page. Mine and only mine. The second was a voice recorder. My hand shook slightly as I pressed play. Her voice filled the quiet room. Soft, certain, and stronger than I remembered. If they try to twist this, Emma, you show them this tape. I trust you. Only you. It was only 23 seconds long. But it was more love, more belief, more clarity than Marjorie had ever shown me in years. The third was a note. 4 lines in Grandma's angled handwriting. Blood doesn't make them worthy. If you're reading this, they've already turned on you. Take what's yours. Don't look back. I sat in her chair, staring at those words until they blurred. Not because of tears, but because of recognition. She knew. Not just about the money. She knew about them. She knew they'd twist legacy into leverage. That they'd erase me with polite words and staged smiles. And still she gave me this. Not just the will, but clarity. Proof. A voice when mine would be drowned out. I packed everything into my bag. The envelope, the note, the recorder. By morning, I wasn't going to ask for space at the table anymore. I was going to put the truth right in front of them. The kitchen was already alive when I walked in. Claire sat at the island, sipping her coffee like a queen who had already won. Dad flipped through spreadsheets, his glasses sliding down his nose. And Marjorie hummed at the stove, stirring oatmeal like this was any normal family morning. None of them even looked up when I entered. I pulled the manila envelope from my bag and laid it flat on the counter, right between the croissants and the legal pads. Claire noticed first. Her eyes flicked from my face to the envelope, then narrowed. "What's this?" she asked. Dad didn't look up. "We're in the middle of something. Can this wait, Emma?" "No," I said. My voice was steady. "It can't." I slid the envelope closer to him. "You'll want to read this." The wooden spoon in Marjorie's hand trembled, just slightly. Her smile faltered for the first time in years. Claire scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Seriously? You brought your own paperwork? Is this some sad attempt to make yourself feel important again?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I opened the envelope slowly, carefully. I pulled out the amendment to Grandma Ruth's will, unfolded the crisp papers, and laid them flat on the counter like I was turning over the final card in a game they thought I wasn't even playing. "Signed," I said, my voice even. I tapped the page with my finger. Dated. Witnessed. Beverly Jacobs from Grandma's Garden Club was there. So was the notary. Dad's hand tightened around his chair. He didn't speak, but I saw his knuckles turn white. Marjorie's spoon shook in her grip. Claire reached for the papers, like she could crumple them into nothing, but I blocked her hand. "Don't," I said, firm but calm. "You already knew what you were doing. You don't get to act surprised now." For the first time in years, silence fell in that kitchen. Not the normal silence, but the heavy kind. The kind that happens when truth rips the roof off a lie. I left the papers there, walked to the sink, and poured myself a glass of water. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The damage had already been done, and I hadn't even pressed play on the recorder yet. "You've crossed a line," Marjorie finally said, her voice tight, controlled, like she was fighting to stay calm. "This wasn't what your grandmother intended." I met her eyes. "You're right," I said softly. "She intended honesty, and she left that to me." Claire let out a short, sharp laugh. "This is pathetic. You always hated being in the background, Emma. Now you're turning her death into a stage show." I set my glass down. "I stayed quiet for years," I said. "You mistook that for obedience." Dad opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. I reached into my pocket, pulled out Grandma's small voice recorder, and set it gently on the table. I pressed play. Her voice filled the kitchen. Thin, aged but steady. "If they try to twist this, Emma, you show them this tape. I trust you. Only you." When it ended, the silence that followed wasn't just heavy, it was crushing. Marjorie stood frozen, her hands curled tightly at her sides. Claire stared down into her coffee like maybe it could explain all this away. Dad's face was pale, his lips pressed in a hard line. I slid another envelope across the counter. Filed this morning, I said. An injunction to freeze the estate until everything is reviewed. Dad finally spoke, his voice rough. You're trying to dismantle this family. No, I said, calm but sharp. I'm refusing to let it dismantle me. I gathered the documents, slipped them back into my bag, and walked out of the kitchen. No shouting. No dramatic exit. Just footsteps across hardwood. Let them sit in the silence. Let them wonder what else I had prepared. In the hallway, I pulled out my phone. A text from my attorney waited on the screen. Injunction accepted. Funds frozen. Pending review. You're in control of next steps. I let out a slow breath. For the first time in years, I felt steady. I wasn't just their daughter anymore. I was the executor of the truth. The elevator doors opened onto the top floor of Maddox and Harper, the law firm that handled most of Grandma's estate. The receptionist looked startled when she saw me. She stood quickly, smoothing her blouse. Miss Parker, we weren't expecting you. You are now, I said. I walked straight past her, into the boardroom where 5 senior partners sat flipping through quarterly reports. Their chatter stopped when I entered. Emma Parker, said Mr. Lawson, the senior partner, squinting at me over his glasses. We weren't told to expect. I dropped the thick folder onto the polished table. As of last week, I hold controlling interest in the firm. 51%. Assigned through the trust of Ruth Maddox. Upheld by a notarized amendment. Documentation is right here. Claire was already in the room. She stood from her chair, her arms crossed tightly. This is a stunt, she hissed. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down. Calm. Steady. No, Claire. This is succession. The room was still until the door burst open. My Uncle Richard stormed in, cheeks flushed, his tie loose. This is outrageous, he snapped. You can't jest. I can, I interrupted, sliding another folder across the table. And I will. Starting with transparency. Inside were copies of financial reports, buried transactions, hidden transfers. Page 3, I said, my voice level. Richard used firm funds to cover personal gambling debts. Over $80,000 labeled as client entertainment. The payments went directly to his personal Venmo. Richard's face reddened. That's. And page 5, I continued, ignoring him. Blue Rock Advisory. A fake vendor you set up. Supposedly for consulting. But it's just a shell company that filtered estate money into your personal accounts. Cayman Islands, Florida, Zurich. I have every transfer, every timestamp. Claire's chair screeched as she stood, her voice sharp. You've been spying on your own family. I turned to her, steady. No. I've been protecting what's left of Grandma's name. Mr. Lawson cleared his throat, flipping through the papers. We weren't made aware of any of this. You are now, I said. Richard's shoulders slumped. He stared at me, not with anger anymore, but with something smaller. Fear. I didn't flinch. Because the nameplate in front of me no longer read guest. It read managing partner. The forensic report came at dawn the next day. 112 pages of rot, dressed in professional words and polished spreadsheets. 6 years of records. 6 years of theft. Claire had invoices billed to departments that didn't even exist. Richard had fake equipment rentals, money that never bought anything. And Marjorie? She had a holding company, tucked quietly offshore, pulling money straight out of Grandma's foundation. The investigator didn't even look surprised. He handed me the report and said, You've got enough here to file criminal and civil charges. I nodded. Send everything to the legal team. Proceed fully. By late morning, my attorney called. We can file charges today, Emma. But you need to be certain. This will be loud. It'll be public. I am certain, I said. My voice was steady. This isn't about revenge. It's about respect for Grandma, for what she built, for what they destroyed. He paused, then said, Understood. We'll initiate proceedings this afternoon. I hung up, looked out the office window, and watched the city move below me. People crossing streets, carrying coffee cups, unlocking their doors. Life moved forward, like always. And that was the part they never understood. I didn't need to win to feel whole. I just needed the lies to stop. I highlighted sections of the report, leaving notes for the compliance team. I didn't flinch when I reached Dad's retirement fund, tied to shady transfers. I didn't pause when Claire's signature showed up on falsified contracts. Because healing doesn't come from silence. It comes from truth. Out loud. On record. With your name signed at the bottom. And my name wasn't going away. It was just beginning to mean something again. At 12:03 p.m., a text lit up my phone. 1 hour. No lawyers. You owe me that much. I didn't reply. I just showed up. The garden behind St. Andrew's was too quiet. The same bench Grandma used to sit on during choir practice. The same flower beds Marjorie used to pretend to care for. Pruning roses while whispering to the estate planner on her phone. She was already there when I arrived. Dressed in white, smooth and perfect. Not a wrinkle in sight. She looked up as I approached and patted the space beside her on the bench. I didn't sit. I have to hand it to you, she said softly. I underestimated you. That was your first mistake, I said. But not your last. Her voice stayed calm, almost gentle. You think this is about power? It isn't. I kept this family together, Emma. Every time your father faltered, I held the line. Every time Claire broke down, I steadied her. You were always the wild card. You wanted the truth, no matter what it cost. I stepped closer. You didn't hold anything together, Marjorie. You controlled it. And there's a difference. Her eyes flickered just slightly. Grief? Regret? No, just calculation. Everything crumbles, she whispered. Even the truth. You'll see. It starts slow, then all at once. I studied her face. Calm on the outside, but the certainty had cracks. She stood slowly, smoothed her dress and said, I don't expect forgiveness. But I do expect consequences. I didn't answer. I just turned, walked down the stone path, and left her sitting there in silence. Back at the office, I signed the final documents authorizing the release of testimony. Every asset, every dollar, every name. The courtroom date was already set. This was no longer private. The truth was about to be laid out for everyone to see. The courthouse smelled of old wood and paper. Dust hung in the air, catching in the sunlight that cut through high windows. The room was full, but quiet, that tense kind of quiet that feels like the world is holding its breath. When the clerk called our case, the sound echoed like a hammer. My family sat across from me at the defense table. Dad, jaw locked tight. Claire, eyes flashing, whispering furiously to her attorney. Uncle Richard, shoulders slumped, avoiding eye contact with anyone. And Marjorie calm, straight-backed, flawless in her white suit. As if this was just another business meeting she could win by smiling in the right places. I sat at the petitioner's table, documents stacked neatly in front of me. My attorney leaned over, whispering, Stay calm. We've got the evidence. Just breathe. But I didn't need the reminder. I had already been calm for weeks. The storm had passed inside me. Now it was their turn to stand in it. The judge entered, robes heavy, voice firm. We are here today to review allegations of fraud, theft, and mismanagement of the estate of Ruth Maddox Parker. My grandmother's name rang out in the chamber. For the first time I felt her close. Not gone. Not erased. Present. The prosecution began. They laid out transaction after transaction. Offshore accounts. Shell companies. Fake invoices. Missing donations that had been promised to charities. My grandmother's money, her legacy. Stolen by the very people who once toasted her name. Each page of evidence hit the defense like a stone. Claire fidgeted. Richard muttered under his breath. Dad wiped his forehead. His lawyer whispering frantically to him. But Marjorie? She didn't move. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded, her gaze fixed on the judge. When my attorney called me to the stand, the room went silent. I took the oath. My voice didn't shake. Miss Parker, the lawyer began. Can you explain your role in uncovering this evidence? I nodded. Yes. I found inconsistencies in the will after my grandmother passed. At first, I thought it was just a clerical error. But when I looked deeper, I discovered entire accounts missing, funds transferred, and records manipulated. I traced everything back to family members sitting in this room. And why, the lawyer asked, did you decide to bring this forward knowing the personal cost? I looked at my father, at Claire, at Richard, then finally at Marjorie. Because silence doesn't heal, I said. It hides. And my grandmother trusted me with her truth. I refused to let that be buried. The words didn't feel rehearsed. They felt lived. Cross-examination came sharp and fast. Claire's attorney tried first. Isn't it true that you were left out of family decisions for years? That you're acting out of resentment? I met his eyes steady. Being left out doesn't create fraud. Paper trails do. And I brought every one of them. Richard's lawyer tried next. These transactions are complex. Isn't it possible you misunderstood them? I leaned forward slightly. I didn't misunderstand. I hired forensic accountants, investigators, and legal auditors. They confirmed every finding. This isn't an opinion. It's fact. Then came Marjorie's lawyer. Calm, precise. His tone like a knife slicing through butter. You were your grandmother's favorite, weren't you? He asked. No, I said simply. I was her listener. He arched a brow. You gained from this process, did you not? You now control shares in Maddox and Harper. Yes, I said. Control that was legally assigned to me through her will. Control that would have been erased if fraud had succeeded. The lawyer tried one last angle. And you expect this court to believe that you alone, out of everyone, were the only one who saw the truth? I didn't flinch. Not the only one. The difference is, I didn't look away. When I stepped down from the stand, I caught Marjorie's gaze for the first time. Her eyes didn't hold anger. They didn't hold fear. They held something else. Respect. Cold, reluctant, but real. The trial lasted 2 days. Evidence piled high. Testimonies cut deep. By the final morning, the air in the courtroom was heavy, like everyone knew the ending before it was spoken. The judge read the decision slowly. After review of evidence and testimony, this court finds that funds belonging to the estate of Ruth Maddox Parker were indeed misappropriated, concealed, and misused. Restitution is ordered. The parties involved will face civil penalties, with criminal proceedings referred to state authorities. Claire let out a small cry. Dad lowered his head into his hands. Richard cursed under his breath. And Marjorie? She finally blinked. The judge continued. Control of the estate, its assets, and all trust holdings will remain with Emma Parker, as assigned in the legitimate amendment to the will. This court recognizes her as the lawful executor and controlling partner in Maddox and Harper. The gavel struck. Once. Twice. Done. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded the steps. Microphones pushed forward. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted. Emma, how does it feel to win? Do you have anything to say to your family? Are you going to press criminal charges? I stopped at the top of the stairs, looked out at the sea of lenses, and spoke simply. This isn't about winning. This is about truth. My grandmother taught me that silence only protects the wrong people. Today her voice was heard again. That's all that matters. Then I walked down the steps. Not rushed. Not afraid. Just steady. Weeks passed. The newspapers ran the story. Heir exposes family fraud. Maddox legacy saved by granddaughter. Some painted me as a hero. Others as a traitor. I didn't care. The firm was mine to lead now. Meetings filled my days. Audits filled my nights. Cleaning the rot wasn't glamorous. It was exhausting. But it was necessary. One evening as I left the office, I found a letter waiting at my door. No return address. Just my name. Inside, in neat handwriting, were 5 words. You did what I couldn't. No signature. But I knew who it was from. Marjorie. Months later, the house felt different when I visited. Quieter. The floorboards still creaked in the same places, but the air wasn't heavy anymore. I stood in Grandma's study, the one I had once stood outside, listening to whispers that cut me out. Now I placed her photo on the desk. Her smile looked softer than I remembered. I kept my promise, I whispered. The silence didn't feel heavy this time. It felt full. And here's the truth I learned. Families can betray you. Blood can twist itself into chains. But truth? Truth doesn't go away. It waits. Patient. Unyielding. All it takes is one person willing to open the door and let it speak. For me, that was enough. Not revenge. Not even victory. Just finally peace.